Hello, everyone, and welcome to The View from the Top. I'm sorry to disappoint you if you were tuning in expecting to see Brian Friedman, but instead, I am your co-host today, along with the one and only Peggy Smith. Welcome, Peggy.
Hi, Michelle. Listen, I would like to say that we are Brian's younger, better looking sisters. So, yes, we miss him, but come on, let's go with this.
Yes, absolutely. So, Brian, we hope you are enjoying your holiday with your family, and we got it today. So, very excited and honored to be here. So, everybody, you know how this works. Let us know who's here, that you're here. Let us know where you're from. We don't know if you're out there if you don't let us know you're here. So, Peggy, while we wait for some folks to chime in, where are you, by the way?
Well, you know what? I'm actually up here in the Pacific Northwest. So, and it's stunning. We're actually getting record warm weather. And so, we had a nice long holiday here in the US. I think we also had similar in other parts of the world, bank holidays, right? And, I believe your side of the world had terrible weather, right? Like 45 or 46 or something.
It was a chilly holiday weekend for a lot of us in the Northeast. So,
so no barbecue, huh?
Really, unless you were under an umbrella. So
yeah, the unofficial start to the summer didn't happen for you,
not this weekend.
Yeah. So we were in the 80s. It was good. Man,
like tons of people coming in from all over, of course, right? Detroit, Chicago, New Jersey, Texas, Nashville.
Bridget Ritchie, speaking of somebody that's traveling, she's out golfing in Palm Desert, which is all kinds of wrong. I'm not happy about that, but it looks like she made it back to Chicago. But, and our friend Anita, who's in cicada country. Are you getting affected by the cicadas?
No, not where I am.
Yeah, no, out here either. Did you see the clip of the guy on the news? The thing climbed all the way up his tie. We don't want this. Put all the way up his tie live inside the Capitol.
Absolutely.
It went around his neck.
No.
And he dropped a few F-bombs, let's say. Yeah.
So it's so wonderful. People are rolling in from all over as usual. We love it. Absolutely love it. So thank you, everybody, for the warm welcome you're giving to Peggy and I, as we are your guest co-hosts for the hour. As we mentioned at the top, Brian is on a well-deserved family vacation. So as we're waiting for some other folks to join us, let me tell you who we have on the show today. We have Adam Lowy from Move for Hunger. We've got Marina Brizar from Talent Beyond Boundaries. And we've got Ian Robinson from Fragomen. They are here to talk about the important work that they are all doing for our industry about giving back. And our theme today is about mobility giving back. And of course, we'll have our usual updates from Julia and Pat. And then I should mention, as always, the show is approved for GMS, SHRM, and HRC credits, and we will give those codes out at the end of the show. I'd also like to share with you quickly who's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Next week, we will, of course, return with another episode of Benivo Bites, and that will feature a live case study with Phillips 66. And the week after, the View from the Top will be back talking about talent and diversity. And our guest will be Kim Ari Yoel from Rock Central. So a couple of great shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. So with that, why don't we get started with Julia and Pat? And if everybody just gives me a second, we'll give Julia her little intro. If it would work for me. Hello, Julia. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Very nice to see you.
So I understand today you are going to be chatting with us about protecting low income of migrant workers.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I wanted to use this opportunity to say a few words about the what impact the pandemic has had on low-skilled migrant workers, and particularly in the UAE, but also looking globally. And I wanted to give a big shout out and a thank you to Murtaza Khan and Haida Hussein and Azim Muhuddin, who are partners in our Fragomen UAE office, because they've helped me put this together. But the pandemic has had a really huge toll on so many different communities, but it has had a profound effect and impact on low-skilled migrant workers. And exactly this time last year, the World Bank did a really very detailed report examining the social protection responses to low-paid migrant workers affected by the COVID-19. And the report made the point that the living and working conditions of these migrants made them particularly vulnerable to contracting the virus, because often they're in shared accommodation, and also they often lack appropriate support, including healthcare. And in addition to that, what happened during the pandemic is, of course, there was a huge impact to the economy, and many of them suddenly found themselves without a job. And one of the things that the World Bank did was forecast what it would do to remittances. And I think it's quite incredible. If you think in 2019, remittances, which were, from these workers to their home countries, was $554 billion. So that's a huge amount. And they predicted it would be cut by 20% because of the pandemic. And in fact, the real figure was lower than that. So the UAE did do a lot of things that were very good. And in fact, they gave free COVID testing. But we were still seeing across the world things like contract substitution. So when workers travel, they're given a different contract than they were believed that they were going to have, or the passports are illegally withheld, or there's disputes over the pay. So there's numerous organizations which are looking at these issues, including LAMP, which is the Labour Mobility Partnership, and also an organization called the Global Forum for Migration and Development, which is chaired by our chairman, Austin Fragomen, the business mechanism part of it. But last week, there was the Abu Dhabi Dialogue, and Murtaza Khan was an observer to that. And they meet, it's a really good forum, because they meet with the sending and the receiving countries. And they were discussing a number of things that they're going to do for the future, including taking an acknowledgement of how the future of work has changed for these migrants. And that's another interesting thing, because we often talk about the future of work, and we talk about it in relation to very highly skilled migrants, or very, very highly skilled workers. But of course, it has changed for low skilled migrants, because technology has really advanced. And that's been a big theme of the pandemic, how we've seen technology advance. And for low skilled migrants, this means that they need retraining often. So there's lots of really good initiatives that started, where people will get training and it'll be free. And they'll also get certification, which is very, very important. And the other thing is that the idea is that they should get a comprehensive orientation before they accept the job, when they accept the job, and when they get to the country. And they should be then informed of all these free courses and support. And another thing, a sort of last minute bulletin, which is coming from Qatar and Azim Muhuddin, which is, as the World Cup is getting closer, Qatar has brought in some special measures for protection. In particular, they've just set up this platform where workers can file complaints. So that's a really, really good development. So, in summary, it's great to have the opportunity to talk about this sector, because it's not a sector that we normally talk about. And there's a lot of things that business can do to support them, particularly if you're actually employing a lot of these workers.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle.
Important. Yeah, thank you for that, Julia. It's so important. So thank you for sharing.
Lovely.
All
Thank
right. Wonderful. All right. I'm going to bring on Pat, expat Pat, and he'll give us our tax update.
Hi, Michelle.
There, Pat, welcome. Good to see you again.
Good morning. How exciting to be on the show again.
Yeah. So I understand you're going to bring us a few updates about maybe a vaccine credit and
yeah, exactly.
other things.
There's been a lot of big news. I mean, especially here on the East Coast here in the United States, mask mandates are being lifted, and people are traveling. They are going everywhere, and I think a lot of employers are thinking about, how to get employees back to work. What does that mean coming back to the office? Certainly you'd want your employees in the office vaccinated. And so I did a little bit of research if there are any special tax rules about vaccinations. And I did find an interesting one here in the United States. Employers can claim a tax credit for helping employees take paid time off to get a vaccine, get the COVID-19 vaccine. And that's a new rule that the IRS issued back in April. So it's been part of the COVID relief to have credits available for paid time off, paid sick leave, and the like. Especially if you're sick with with COVID. But this new rule allows employers to claim a credit for 100% of wages paid during that paid leave to get a vaccine, as well as recovering from the vaccine. Obviously, some folks do get some side effects from that. So that is something that is interesting, I think, that employers can claim a credit for that.
Are you seeing that globally?
No, I did some research yesterday to see if there's anything like that in other countries. And about the only thing close to it is that companies can deduct the cost of providing the vaccines and the out-of-pocket costs, but nothing as generous as what we're seeing here in the United States. So this new credit is only available from April through September. So if companies are looking to do that, they should be trying to encourage their employees to go. And of course, there's so many different incentives to get the vaccine, because at this point, people who wanted to get it, they've gotten it. Now we have to get the skeptics.
Being bribed.
Yes. And that includes lotteries. It includes free drinks, free food. And, what would an employer do? Well, here's one thing that perhaps they can do that. So, that I can't, Michelle, what do you think employers can do to help encourage employees to get the vaccine?
I think the incentives are probably going to help kind of push those other folks who are not as willing to do it. I'm seeing colleges give incentives, giveaways, tuitions, gift cards. So if that's what's going to take, then okay.
Yeah, I think so too. So hopefully we'll get to the point where we have that infamous herd immunity, but we'll see. Okay. Certainly something to look forward to over the next few months. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the flip side, not coming back to the office necessarily, but the whole remote worker and working from anywhere. And I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record. We've talked about this before, right? Remote worker tax issues. But I think now's a good time to reemphasize and remind folks, because now folks that are having the restrictions on travel and masks being lifted, they want to go places. They're tired of staying home. So, companies probably already have a remote worker policy in place, but it's very important to keep tabs on that, especially now as things are opening up. Do you know where your workers are actually working? Where are they actually working? And, I think that'll be something that companies and global mobility managers need to be focusing on as we're entering this new phase, because, back to the old normal, it'll be the new normal. And that will be a spectrum of in-office, working from home, working anywhere, or some sort of a hybrid commuter type of arrangement. So this will be something that we'll be grappling with going forward. And the tax authorities are also trying to catch up as well. So, I know that we've talked a year ago about the special state tax rules here in Massachusetts. Telecommuters coming from New Hampshire were still being stuck with state tax based on the rules here in Massachusetts. And even the state of New Hampshire sued the state of Massachusetts. That case is still in front of the Supreme Court. But in theory, once Governor Baker lifts the state of emergency, that'll be on June 15th, 90 days after that period of time, people that still choose to commute or work remotely from New Hampshire, if they stay that way and not come back to their work facilities here in Massachusetts, technically they no longer would owe Massachusetts state tax. But we'll see. I think the state of Massachusetts may try to make this a rule permanent. Very similar to what New York does with the so-called convenience of employer rule. And I just saw a story this morning how some employees that used to work in New York, they filed their 2020 tax returns as non-residents and were asking for state refunds from the state of New York. Well, good luck. I think that they are going to get some severe pushback from the tax authorities in New York as to whether they will allow those refund claims. So, the rules are going to be evolving as tax authorities catch up with this new spectrum of remote work and working in an office and the like. So stay tuned. And I would suggest that mobility managers try to keep tabs on this, especially in this new era.
It's definitely a hot topic.
Yeah.
Well, great.
So that's my update.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that as always. So with that, we'll see you at the end of the show. And I'm going to bring Peggy back on, and we are going to get moving with hi there. Welcome back here.
Yeah, it's kind of fun how I get moved back and forth. So it's really interesting. Wasn't that insightful from Pat? I mean,
and Julia. Yeah, both of them always bring such a wealth of information.
The immigration stuff, we're kind of used to that. But the other thing that's kind of fun on the vaccination, there's been some great fun chatter going on in here talking about it might make you grow a tail if you get the vaccine. So our mobility friends post-pandemic have not lost their sense of humor, Michelle. I love that.
That is absolutely true. Yeah.
So we kick off the next part?
Yeah, I think we should. I think we should think about bringing our guests on, because I'm sure that's what people, they want to hear.
Okay, so let me throw this out there before we bring them on, because I just love the audience and the interaction, and I wish I could give shout outs to everybody, Jack, Elena, Beth Nielsen, Lisa Fontana, a bunch of people have done some shout outs for us, but I want to throw a question out there to them and ask them a little bit about what their orgs are doing uniquely in the Give Back for Mobility. I'd love to hear from them if that's okay, before we bring our panelists on. And Michelle, I mean, while they're giving us that in the chat, what's Benivo doing? I don't want to put you on the spot here, but what are you all doing for Give Back?
So I think Benivo does. They've got a great charitable program, and happy to talk about that for a minute. So with Benivo, there is the ability as employees, as part of their welcome gift, they've got the ability to choose a cause, a charity of their choice to donate to, whether that be in their home or their host country. And then additionally, as part of the Benivo platform, employees have the opportunity to earn credits per se through the Social Insights program, to be able to earn credits to give additional donations to charities on their behalf. And the cool thing is that organizations on the whole get to see kind of where those impacts are being made. So they can see how many trees are being planted or how many medical kits are being donated. So it's a real feel-good kind of program for the organizations and for employees alike.
Yeah, that's great. And I see just a couple of comments in here where the impact group, for example, gives people 2 days to do what they want to do. And I love that. And same with our friends at Cornerstone. To me, that makes it really intimate and personal. And so people take that and they do that. Of course, Kathy's here talking about the donation for Move for Hunger. So keep throwing those into the chat channel. We'll give those a shout out. I love that. I love the charitable heart of our organization. Yeah, we've got some great stuff. Thank you, Tara, for your comment for what you all are doing with BAM. I love that. But let's go ahead and bring our guests on. What do you say?
Let's bring them out. I'm going to bring on, welcome, Adam.
Hey, how are you?
Marina. Awesome. And we've got Ian. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Hi.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michelle, for bringing them. You're quite adept with that. But I guess without further ado, let's start. I don't feel like I want to read a bio. I think we're all storytellers and it's better to hear from you. So Adam, I'm just going to start with you, and maybe for our friends that aren't as familiar with you, to talk just a little bit about your organization, yourself, and then, Ian and Marina will follow up with the two of you for the Talent Beyond Boundaries.
Awesome. Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Michelle. So I founded Move for Hunger 12 years ago out of my family's small moving company in New Jersey. The company's been around for about 100 years. My great-grandfather started it, so I've been in the moving business longer than I would care to be, if you will. I grew up working on a moving truck and kind of learned an appreciation for the industry, but we always saw people throwing away food and all sorts of things when they were relocating. So when we founded Move for Hunger, it was really about just this simple idea of letting people donate their food when they move and leveraging the resources that we had, which was transportation. Today, we have more than 1,000 professional moving companies that work with us across the US and Canada. We've expanded to other industries, and we're leveraging, again, the resources of moving and relocation and multifamily and corporate housing to ultimately get more food to people in need. There are 42 million Americans struggling with hunger. It's 690 million people worldwide that go to bed hungry each and every night. And at the same time, when people are struggling, it's 35%, at least here domestically, of the food produced in the United States ends up in landfills. So, food waste is a huge problem. Hunger is a huge problem. And we're really just proud to be kind of one part of that solution, really driving food literally to food banks and pantries. And today we've been feeding more than 19 million people.
Wow. Adam, I can't let you go. You're a humble gentleman, a great story, great history. But I really, truly, for our friends that aren't aware of your big appearance on NBC, why don't you talk a little bit about that? Just real fun. For a couple
Absolutely. You don't start a nonprofit to get on television, but I'm really, we were thrilled for the opportunity to be featured on the Today Show about a month and a half ago. Al Roker kind of narrated a little bit of our organization's history and impact. And for us, it was just an incredible opportunity to raise more awareness about these issues that we're really focused on. And I know we'll talk about it in a bit, but we're all reeling from this COVID-19 pandemic and how much more the need has grown just over this short time of 15 months or so is incredible. So big shout out to the Today Show and Al Roker. I'm very grateful to have that platform.
Maybe they're watching.
Yeah. You know what? Send them this clip because we could come on and guest host that third hour. I'm pretty confident.
I agree. You two are phenomenal hosts.
There you go. Marina, Ian, would love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about Talent Beyond Boundaries and yourself and the organization and what you're trying to do.
Great. So thank you so much for everyone who's joining. Really, really happy to be here. So my name is Marina Brizar. I'll start with my personal background, which is that of a refugee. So I was born in Bosnia just before the Civil War. Spent my childhood through a siege and through refugee camps, and eventually moved to Australia with my family through UNHCR's resettlement program. So you are all hearing an Australian twang, but I'm calling in from London, where I moved to start establishing Talent Beyond Boundaries in the UK. So Talent Beyond Boundaries is a global organisation. We have a presence in Australia, in Canada, in the US, the UK, Lebanon and Jordan. And our mission really is to lift people out of displacement, so forcibly displaced people, refugees, stateless people, into work and into skilled visas. So the organisation really exists to change the rhetoric and the systems that prevent people who are skilled but displaced as being, you know, considered as skilled migrants and meaningful contributors to society. So that's a bit about me. And Ian is here not only as an immigration partner mastermind, but as a trustee of TBB. So Ian, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you. I do feel quite humble around Adam and Marina. It feels they achieve an awful lot really to help people. I suppose my part in TBB as a trustee has been to help the passage of discussions with the UK's Parliament and the UK's government around making it possible for skilled displaced people to even get into the country with a work permit. There is so much in the system that deliberately or otherwise excludes them from the UK that we just wanted to try and fix it. And actually, and I can't take credit, Gemma Hislop in particular at Fragomen was brilliant, Marina was brilliant. RAMP, where I'm also on the board, we're really good in the House of Lords at getting a commitment out of ministers. But looking at how we can do that, and then it's a bit like my job really. If my job was really only about UK immigration, it wouldn't be the most comprehensive job. So we then also need to be looking at what we can do elsewhere in the world, and I will always be second fiddle, of course, to Marina. But the scheme can make such a difference to people's lives. It's such a good opportunity for people in mobility to help vulnerable people to just use the talent that they were born with and that they built up and make the most of it.
Yeah. You know, it's first off, it's very humbling, Marina, to hear your personal story. And I think, again, being in an industry that it is of storytellers, thank you for sharing that and how you came to sort of have such passion around TBB and getting tremendous amount of shout outs from Meredith and Kerwin and a number of folks sitting in the channel talking about, you know, what great causes you were both doing. But so I want to pick up on that and say, what do you think, you know, is the most, Marina, we'll start with you. What do you think is the most challenging part of what you're trying to do for you and your team?
I think the first challenge is rhetoric. So we work with people who are classed as refugees or asylum seekers. And the biggest challenge is to say that, first of all, they're people and people who may have had careers or ambitions or whatever else. And the fact that their circumstances have led them to be displaced doesn't diminish that at all. And so there's a necessary shift in rhetoric to say that you can be both skilled and displaced, and you don't have to be cornered in one thing. So second to that is this idea of change. So connected to rhetoric is an idea that we have to change perhaps immigration systems, perhaps the way we speak to organizations about how they hire talent, why they move people. You know, now we're talking about remote work and going back into the office. A lot of questions we get is, well, why do we need to sponsor them and bring them to this country? Because there is this secondary motive of actually giving someone a second chance at life. So I think the two main challenges are, you know, the connotations and the labels that come with being a refugee or a displaced person. And on the other hand, the change that needs to happen systematically in governments, in organizations, and in people's mindsets at people's dinner tables around this as a new way forward for a globalized community.
You know, I love what you were talking, which is cleaning and looking differently at the language so we can destigmatize it. Hopefully we'll have time at the end of our session today to talk a little bit about that same element with mental health. We've got to work really hard to destigmatize that. And yeah, when you think of displaced workers and refugees, we all have these images in our mind of, you know, really disparate parts of the world. So thank you for sharing for sharing that. That's a good place to start. Adam, how about from Move for Hunger? What's one of the challenging aspect for you and your team?
Yeah, I think very similarly, it's we're changing an industry, and in fact, we're changing multiple industries. When I started the organization, it was about doing something nice. I knew nothing about nonprofits. I figured we were in people's homes. Let's just pick up the food and get it to where it needs to be. And as I thought about this more and more, and I thought about creating sustainable change over time, I realized that it's less about me and my family's moving company and even the organization Move for Hunger. And it's more about how do you change the processes that are in place across these industries so that it actually will maintain beyond an organization. So while we're very proud that we have 1,000 moving companies involved, it's been really cool to hear the stories of, especially during the pandemic, hey, now this moving company started doing weekly deliveries to an emergency feeding site for children because they were out of school for so long. Or this multifamily person joined the board of their local food bank, and they never would have done that had they not begun to get involved in Move for Hunger. Or, you are now seeing, we've got movers and properties or relocation professionals adding Move for Hunger to their policies, and then every day food is being collected as people move. If we shut our doors tomorrow, my hope is that those things will continue to happen. And that's really about creating that sustainable change. And it's hard because, as Marina knows, you got to keep driving that. You got to kind of keep hammering that in until you can build up enough participation. So again, as many as we already have involved, this industry, just relo alone, is a very large industry, and we don't have nearly enough to say, all right, we're done here. We need to keep driving that message. We need to keep creating awareness. We need to change what business as usual looks like. So sustainability, food recovery, and ultimately community are kind of top of mind as we go through our daily processes.
Could I just one quick point? They're both being, it's completely right. Rhetoric is important. Sustainability is important, but also money. So I'm on the board of TBB. I'm on the board of a labour exploitation charity, a not-for-profit where we have researchers in Parliament, and we hope to improve the quality of conversation there. A couple of advisory boards as well, and then I help several other charities. None of them have got any money. None of them. And it's two things, actually. It's time or money. So if you're sat watching this thinking, what can we do? We've got no time. We can't give that sort of time to different projects. Just send them loads of cash, like loads and loads, because it's it takes money to do what they do. But it's such an important part of it. The more it can be about core funding rather than tied to particular projects, the better. But do try and do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I know a lot of organizations, in fact, the Foundation for Workforce Mobility talks a lot about giving time, talent, or treasure. And that's exactly what you're hitting on.
Yeah.
Is the treasure if you can't give the time, and you may not feel you have the talent to do that. So, it's interesting trying to solve these and, hear your stories and the challenges. Adam, I want to come back to you because, I was just reading an article this past weekend about the increase that we saw in demand for food banks here in the U.S. I think it was like a 55% increase. And in fact, another staggering stat was over 40% of the people during the pandemic, it was the first time they've ever had to go to a food bank. And the stories are, they never thought that, in fact, some of them, the feature story was this woman used to volunteer. She never thought she would need the services. So as we ease out of the pandemic, it seemed to me that the food insecurity almost went vertical, right? But as we ease out of the pandemic, is your sense that it's going to equally decline vertically, or is this something that's really systemic and we just didn't realize it until the pandemic?
Yeah, so those are great points and great questions. Yes, I mean, this food insecurity, hunger, if you will, is really a symptom of poverty. So, the reason people are hungry is because they can't afford food. So even before the pandemic, there were 37 million Americans struggling to put food on the table. They were choosing between healthcare, they were choosing between rent, they were choosing between car payments, all sorts of things, and literally feeding their children. And these are really decisions that nobody should have to make. And the people that were most vulnerable prior to the pandemic were getting hit the hardest once that pandemic came. You can look at seniors. It's 1 in 11 seniors in this country that are going to bed hungry. 1 in 6 children, 1 in 4 veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq war. And African Americans specifically face hunger at twice the rate of their white counterparts. So again, when we look at who is struggling, it really is those that were, these communities that were, maybe in these circumstances pre-pandemic. So now that we're coming out, and I don't want to sound doom and gloom, but we really haven't seen the full effects of this. There's still a lot of emergency government payments being made, not just here domestically, but we're seeing that in other countries too, where governments are trying to lift up and help cover some of this time as unemployment begins to level off a bit. But in doing so, and I can speak for our industry, I know a lot of companies are having trouble hiring folks right now for a variety of reasons. So you're not going to necessarily see this go away immediately. It was vertical. There were a million stories like what you described, Peggy, of people going for the very first time, as well as many of the images that maybe you saw in the news of food rotting in the fields because our global food supply chain was broken, and not just food. I mean, many of you, I'm sure, were trying to get toilet paper during this thing, just like I was. And I think really what's going to have to happen now is there needs to be more awareness and willingness across all parties, not just domestically, but globally, to say, hey, how do we treat poverty? Because you're not going to fix hunger unless you treat poverty. And we need to figure out how we're able to rise, lift people up. And some of the work that Marina is doing specifically, is really inspirational to me because, not everybody finds themselves in these circumstances due to situations that are, completely in their control. So how do you take the stigma off? How do you provide opportunity? How do you provide training in some cases, and break through to make sure that people can at least afford to feed themselves and their families? It's crazy right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fantastic comments in here. And as you were talking, it reminded me of both the Gates Foundation, and I think Beth Nielsen had a comment in here about my former employer that, started at farming. So both the Gates Foundation and JK have created farming so that they can help people learn how to use the land, and sort of because they want to. And this gets back to the time, talent, and treasure. And so the individuals can feel that they are building for the world of what that is that they live and need and deliver for themselves. Marina, let's come back to you because, and Adam kind of tapped a little bit about this. We're going to begin, and we actually are already seeing this decline in unemployment, right? So unemployment rates are now really coming down, and which is fantastic. But we're seeing that both it's unevenly distributed, right? That the people that left the workforce during the pandemic, what we call now the she session, right? The women that felt that they had to depart to take care of their families. How are you and your team sort of helping the underrepresented, that talent find opportunities?
That's a great question. I think that for our caseload in particular, we have to be very mindful of the cultural dynamics that are at play. But in terms of what TUB does specifically, we have a dedicated resource for female outreach. So really honing in messages, getting into community sort of settings where they encourage women to sign up and to declare their skills on what we call a talent catalogue. So our talent catalogue is a software and a database of now over 29,000 professionals who are living in displacement, primarily in Lebanon and Jordan.
Ooh.
And typically what we have received as feedback is that women will say, oh, my husband's an engineer, I'm just a teacher. Mm-hmm. So they lead with that person or their spouse who has what in culturally is deemed a more respectable position, whereas we are now saying to all candidates, your skills are as vitally important. And a really good example is females who are nurses who might have a spouse who's a doctor. The need for nurses particularly in the UK, is much higher than it is for doctors. And so it is the case that it is the female applicants who are driving this change out of displacement through work. But I think the other sort of cognizant effort we're making is to really include females in decision making around things like integration and resettlement, because the what we find, and this is a generalization, but this has been our experience, where there's a lot of focus on how much money and how much is a pint of milk, and how much does it cost to get from A to B, and how much is rent. Whereas when we have females in the decision-making process, it's like, do you have homework clubs, and where do the children go to school, and how do they get there? So that's been a really important part of our informed decision-making of candidates, but it's also been really important to really look at the spouses as accompanying talent. So that means, making sure that we understand what their priorities and their skills or their education journeys, their aspirations are, so that we build that into the integration. Because what we have found is that often that accompanying talent can actually get a job at the same place as their spouse who is leading, and we start immediately creating that balance and that importance of sort of striving for what you sort of want to achieve as a family unit.
So let me pivot the question here a little bit. Our friend Kerwin commented a little bit earlier with respect to corporate panels, and maybe you can go back and grab that for us, Michelle, and pop that up there. But my question really is, and with Ian now back as well, we do have such a wonderful community in global mobility. I mean, we are heart, that if there is a persona of ours, it's heart. So my question would be, if you were going to advise a colleague, either in a mobility company, a corporate on that side, reload, tax, or immigration, how would you coach them to use their platform to help people? Anybody? Ian, maybe we'll start with you, because you talked a little bit about some of the stuff from an immigration perspective.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, I hadn't heard time, talent, or treasure before you said it. I don't think that I have any of those three things, but I've got some degree of effort that I can throw in. But I tend to think, firstly, you need to know what your values are. You should know that anyway whenever you're taking a job. That becomes easier as you get older. But if you know where your values sit, then you should be able to work out where you want to contribute. You've got to work out who is out there that you can help. You can't simply sit there and expect them to find you. I don't think we've ever done that. I've certainly never done that. And then you need to make time for them, frankly. From there, it's the same as anything. If you think about how we interact with our colleagues, how we interact with our clients, our job is only ever to work out how we can help other people do their jobs better. So if I'm thinking about talent beyond boundaries, if I'm thinking about RAMP, if I'm thinking about flex and labour exploitation, how can I help? And then do it. So I mean, if there's a law firm out there at the moment that are not providing pro bono support for EUSS applications in the UK, where thousands of people could be here illegally at the end of the month, British people in Europe in Article 50, they need to have a word with themselves, because that could turn people's lives upside down. What Adam has done is brilliant, but you can also look at. So I've seen Kerwin's name pop up a few times. Kerwin is a whirlwind. I think we all know that. But think about what he's done for the community around all the educational videos and so on. But also the opportunities he's created at university. I think it's in Dallas or Washington, but he's expanded Texas. Yeah. You look at that. One of my colleagues, Alex, loves nationality law in a way that just isn't healthy. But he's subsequently the next generation to face the Windrush treatment could be the Chagos Islanders. So he's done an awful lot of work in Parliament and elsewhere on that. And he didn't wait for a parliamentarian to find him. He saw there was an issue, worked out who was looking for it, went away and did it. And it's possible. It is possible. You've got to make the time. You've got to have an interest. If you're not interested, don't do it. But it's definitely possible. I think Marina knows the energy that I bring. I can be a Kerwin type whirlwind as well at times, in the energy I bring. But Marina, is that fair when we think about this?
I absolutely think so. And just to tack on to that, I would say for anyone who wants to get involved, be creative. Like, you know your organization better than anyone else, better than any website can depict. And so you know where your scope is, whether it's volunteering for 2 days, whether it's pledging a number of days of corporate housing, whether it is to support with relocation and setting up a community sponsorship group, whether it's providing free tax advice to reunite family members, or simply spreading the word, simply making a donation. They're sort of things that should be driven by the organization. And I think that's what will give real power, like being creative to say, this is what we think we can do, and this is what we think will help. So like, how do we collaborate on that to actually, achieve an outcome, rather than simply, oh, hey, I'm here and I want to do something. So
yeah.
Adam.
And to build on that too, like I see a lot of companies, and lots of companies get involved with lots of different causes. Mm-hmm. But I always say, like, why don't you focus first on what resources that you have available, right? So if you are a financial services company, for example, maybe focus some of your resources on financial literacy. I mean, that's literally what your company does. Mm. There are organizations out there that are doing that. There's ways to do it. And you can still interact with those other causes. But I think what gets lost a lot of times, and I think a lot of companies sometimes are shy about maybe the work that they're doing behind the scenes. When a company and its employees have purpose, everybody benefits. Doing good is good for business. If you can make your community stronger, don't hide that. Talk about that. Inspire other companies, inspire other employees to get involved. If you are giving your employees X amount of hours to do volunteer time, which I'm really happy to see some companies are doing already, don't make that just like a hidden something, like written in a very long HR policy. No, talk about that. Celebrate it. Find ways to highlight that. These engagement opportunities are critical to employee retention at a time when companies are trying to figure out how do we recruit and retain top talent. These are things that people want to do. And then you take it that full step further back to what are companies' investors looking at in terms of sustainability and ESG and those other pieces as well. That is all more reason to do it. Do it because it's right. Do it because it's the right thing to do and because there's purpose. But don't shy away from the fact that these activities and these ways that you're really engaging with charitable causes and communities can also drive your bottom line. These can be a good thing for your company. And I think the more companies think that way, everybody benefits.
Could I, if I may, just a really quick point, is it's also about, so the pandemic made us a lot braver, certainly our UK practice in terms of pro bono. And that was partly because we began to think, let's just do it. Let's just try. We've always done it, but a lot more new stuff coming up. So when A-level results came through in the UK and students weren't treated as we might have liked them to, we said, well, we can't fix that, but what can we fix? And we created a school that Marina speaks at, which is running again this year. Brilliant school. We had 170 students join it last year. We had MPs, we had journalists, brilliant people. And that's partly the creativity, but it's so much harder for your teams to know what your values are if they only ever see you on WebEx or Skype. You've got to, they can't pick it up by osmosis as they might in the office. If you want people to be proud of where they work, you need to give them reasons and not just hope that they happen to pick it up from a LinkedIn post or similar.
Yeah, if I may, I just want to pick up very quickly on your amazing quote of doing good is good for business. One of our employers, his tagline is it's not a good thing to do. Well, I'll pick it up from you. I'm referencing you, but one of our employers has said it's not only a good thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. So for TBB in particular, for anyone that wants to do anything, hire our talent, hire TBB talent, hire displaced talent, and think about ways in which, again, to embed that creativity, but allowing that creativity to drive policy change, which is more inclusive, not only for displaced people, but just people across the board.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Adam, Marina. In fact, Susie Chapman had even said that. She's, we quoted you all, doing good is good for business. So, Adam, you put this in a broader context of ESG, right? And this has been an incredibly energetic year for a lot of people, but HR and executive leadership have been thrust into things that they never have in prior years around environmental, social, and governance, right? And so I want to sort of get your gauge around that from an inflection point for mobility. I talked about DEI and B years and years ago and thought, man, there's no way DEI can be achieved without mobility. So I want to pick up, maybe is there some, but maybe before I do that, Michelle, you threw out a poll question, I think yesterday or the day before, and would just love to maybe get the results of those. If you could share those with us, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we threw a LinkedIn question out there. I think it was yesterday, asking which of the following 3 areas of environmental, social, or governance do you see mobility having a major impact in? Would it be diversity, equity, and inclusion, Black Lives Matter / Me Too, movement causes, or climate change? And I'll share the results in a second. Obviously, we'd love to hear what the audience, what their comments are.
Yeah.
I try and anticipate what the poll people are going to say, and I'll share with you. I was sort of surprised, but maybe not really. So here are the results. We had 86% saying diversity, equity, and inclusion. 6% saying Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and 9% at climate change. And I'll tell you, I watched the numbers sort of fluctuate over the course of, the last day and a half or so. And climate change was in 3rd place up until the end when I pulled these numbers a bit ago. And I wonder sometimes about if people, think about the impact that mobility has on climate change, right? We're the trucks that are on the road, the ships that are out there moving, stuff around the world, how much packing material is being used by the moving companies and, winding up in the landfills, the bubble wrap, the cardboard, all of that kind of stuff. So, we touch on it all. So, definitely curious what our panelists have to say. Peggy, if you have any thoughts, and I see the comments are also rolling in. So
yeah, we're seeing from the unscientific poll on the right-hand side, seeing a lot of people sort of picking up on D&I and sort of making that comment. And that probably is a very natural, I think, initial fit.
Yeah.
It's interesting that climate change has bubbled. My feeling is that I think that's going to continue to grow, particularly as Gen Z brings itself fully into the workforce. They're just maybe a year or 2 in. We see Greta Thunberg take a very vocal position on a global platform around climate change. But here, this is really interesting. Share this as a sidebar for those that sort of study startup companies, and I've been spending a little bit of energy there myself. But I sit on the board for Seattle University's business school, and there is kind of like a Shark Tank business opportunity. Anyway, there are now a number of platforms that are apps that can measure your personal, you personally, what are you emitting out and what are you doing? And so you can measure that for yourself. So I think you're going to see a lot of VC money and angel investors go after that as a category. But let's hear from our panelists. Would love to hear from any of you with respect to where do you see the inflection point for mobility around these 3 key areas, and what do you think we should grab onto?
Oh man. I mean, to the point of the poll, or the results of the poll, I agree that diversity, equity, and inclusion feels the most obvious, at least within this industry, when you're talking about talent and how we can maybe try to remove bias and all of the things that we can be doing to create a more diverse and equitable workforce. But obviously, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, and kind of what bubbled up during the pandemic, and which has been happening far before the pandemic. And certainly we've been looking at that in our work too, about how do you bring in more people of color, not just into the workforce, but elevate them, make sure that they're, that this community is also part of the conversation, put in leadership positions and hearing perspectives and feedback. And we've worked hard to at least make sure more resources were available online within our organization from an educational standpoint through Move for Hunger. And then that final piece, climate change, which ties directly back to what we do every day. When you talk about food waste, I mean, food is the number one thing that you find in landfills across the country. And it's also one of the top emitters of greenhouse gas emissions that's out there. So if we can figure out better ways to reduce food waste as a whole, at least as, Move for Hunger is concerned, and that's why large, when we talk about I know we're talking about mobility right now, but we work with the multifamily industry as well. And we've got a number of large portfolios like Graystar and Bell Partners and Cortland that are signing up their entire portfolios and basically saying, we want to reduce our footprint. We want to ensure that food isn't just left in the pantry when people are moving out and seeing it thrown away. Same thing happens in mobility, which I think is why we've got so many incredible RMCs that have gotten involved as well, and corporate clients that are saying, hey, this should be part of the process. And going back to kind of what I think both Marina and I said earlier, if we can, as an industry, figure out what's going to move the needle without creating a ton of extra work, but also what is smart, right? Because it's not just about helping the one cause, but it's about helping the company as well. And if we can do these smart things that also benefit community, which I think there are plenty of causes to go around, I think we'll all be in a much better place.
Yeah, fantastic on that. Marina, Ian, any quick comments you want to have on that area with respect to where the inflection point might be?
I definitely see it in diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion. Obviously, given our work, I think it's really interesting because you get a sense from providers, stakeholders, employers that you speak to why they're interested in what you're doing. So sometimes it is purely a skill shortage and it's like, right, you've got a software engineer, we need one of those. Sometimes it's like, tell me more about this person and we're going to build a community around, so it's really interesting that initiatives like what Talent Beyond Boundaries is driving, like what Move for Hunger is driving, can start to bring in all these different aspects to achieve ultimately one goal of getting something from A to B, but do it in such a holistic, such a meaningful and important way.
So sorry to break script, but Marina, I have a question for you because I see this too running an organization. I see companies get involved with Move for Hunger for a lot of the same reasons. It's the right thing, and we want to find ways to incorporate this into our culture. And then we also have companies that will reach out from time to time and say, all right, we're involved, but how can we leverage this? How can you as an organization help us leverage this? Because we want to be doing something that's maybe different than our peers or be the first or share about it in an article. I'm curious.
Absolutely. So we have that same experience and some people want it, some organization want it on a different level. So whether it is articles that are written, blogs that we share, I know that once we had 2 candidates move to an organization called Iris. And once they started sharing that news, the employees then started having this, I don't use social media, but a Twitter hashtag that was trending called One Iris. That became globally trending and they then leveraged that. So I think that going to your point, Adam, about sustainable change, it can be sustainable if it is commercial and it makes business sense, but it's done with the right values and the right principles.
Correct.
So if the values and the principles are there, the fact that there is gain because you are, saying we've created this or we've done that or we've moved that person or this person's now an employee of our company, that's a win-win-win situation for everyone involved. And I think once you achieve that balance, it creates sustainable change, but it also creates scalability. So yeah, that's been our experience.
Because I'm super sensitive to time and I love all the conversation. And if there's a rating, I hope, Michelle, you and I both get top ratings for We're not short on topics here. But one of the things as we wrap, I always like to kind of wrap a little bit lighthearted, and mental health is something that we didn't talk about, and maybe we can pick that up for a future session, Michelle. But with that, I just want to end on a really lighthearted note and start with Adam, Marina, Ian, and then Michelle, I'll turn it back to you. But so for your own mental health, where are you going on vacation this summer? Adam.
I live at the beach, so I'm staying put. And, I'm looking forward to actually just being out of the house and being on the beach as much as I possibly can.
Awesome. All right. I need to come visit you. I think we need to have
Anytime.
on strategy.
Anytime.
Yeah, a Move for Hunger strategy session at your place. Yeah. Marina, how about you?
I'm going to the beach. At the moment, the only place we can go is Portugal on a green list with some beach. So I think Portugal's the next stop for me.
Awesome. Ian, how about you, friend? Where are you headed on vacation?
To the pub, I guess. I might start it immediately. No, I don't know. I think probably Wales or to mum and dad's house near Liverpool, I think. But either way, I'll be in a pub. And the children will be having a nice time somewhere nearby.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'm deeply honored and humbled to have been able to co-host. Michelle, I'll close it out, let you say where you're going on vacation. And thank you all. Be well, be safe, enjoy your families.
Thank you. Thank you. I will be at the beach as well this summer. That is just near and dear to my heart. That is where I get my sanity and my mental health break. So thank you, Peggy. Thank you to our panelists, Ian and Marina and Adam. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for everything you've been doing. Thank you to Brian. Thank you to Nitzen and Benivo for allowing Peggy and I to co-host today. It was a real pleasure. Thank you all. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.